Today we're going to do one of the harder topics, I suppose. It's called standard deviation. So standard deviation is the spread of the data about the mean. So if I had a higher standard deviation, so it could be, 50, and they use the omega sign. It's like a circle with a hat. So if omega is 50, what does that tell you about the spread of the data? It's really spread out. If it's like 5, all the data, so it's like lots of data like this if it's 50. If it's 5, all the data's, clumped together, all together. Do you see what I mean? So it's the spread. So there's lots of people. If we say the northern region of OPs, the old system, the spread could be really big, means there's a real variety of student results. So there's really not so smart people, but there's also really smart people. Where you could go, say, to the southern of Brisbane, and they could just this symbol for mean.
Yes.
Yep. So write it down. These are all the steps. There's quite a few. So, and there's also this other thing called a sample standard deviation and just a normal standard deviation. So do you know the difference between sample of a population and all of the population? Yeah? So I'm going to sample Brisbane students by taking this class, and I'll get the standard deviation for this class's results. Or I'm going to get the actual standard deviation for the whole of the Brisbane students. Tomorrow, if it's on the formula sheet. So just an N is for the total. So is there any questions? Just find the mean, then use the formula to find the standard deviation. Usually use that one when you divide in the formula. So, some of the questions that you need to answer is actually just a bunch of words. So they'll say, the standard deviation is this for this data set, and the standard deviation is this for this data set. Tell us the difference. Tell us what's happening with the spreads. Same with the box plots that we'll do tomorrow. You'll get questions like, what's the difference between these box plots? Explain it, compare, contrast. Do you remember answering questions like that? Some words that you need to focus on using is, say, whether it's concentrated about the mean. So you would say the standard deviation is small. It's 5.3. Therefore, the data is concentrated about the mean. The other standard deviation is large. That means it's spread out from the mean. And that would give you marks. Does that make sense? So, we have these values for the standard deviation. Some of you said the Eagles' scores, so I'm assuming these are goals. They have a more spread out data compared to the Monsters' goals. Does that make sense? Because their standard deviation is larger than the Monsters. Does that make sense? Yep. Yeah, pretty much what I said. Oh, I forgot to say, and this is more concentrated around the mean or closer to the mean. So make sure you say stuff like that. All right? Now, you guys remember stem and leaf plots? So you may have forgotten that this 0 pairs with each of the numbers. So this 1 is 1, and that's 5. On this side, we've got 12, 13, and 17. Does that make sense? Remember this? And same with this side. That 1 and the 3, that's 13. Just in case you forgot that, I thought I'd clear that up. Okay, so looking at this, why do you think, hands up? Darwin's mean is less than Sydney's because Sydney's is more spread out. Okay? So it has more larger values, and that raises the mean up, and it also spreads out the standard deviation. So if Sydney was all concentrated around here, imagine this didn't exist, what would happen to the standard deviation? It would go down. So it might also be 10 because it's concentrated about 1 point. Does that make sense? So I've already got the mean. I'm going to use the fancy formula. So we've got the first value minus the mean plus the second value minus the mean.
So is there even enough space on the example?
Could you not just multiply like each one? Like
So yeah, you can, if you are good, you can go like 3 times 1 minus 2.9. 3.61 plus. So see how I've calculated this bit here? I've calculated the deviations squared and written them down. So you can see it's a very low value. So what does that tell you again? It's concentrated around M, the mean, the lagoon. No.